And Coke refreshes you best. It's the refreshingest. Food goes better with fun, goes better with you, go better with Coke. Things go better with Coca-Cola. Things go better with Coke.
Hi everyone, we're Group 3 and our Build a Brain project focuses on cocaine. Today we're going to show how cocaine affects the brain and body across three neurological states: sobriety, intoxication, and withdrawal. This project is really built around comparison, so you'll see the same brain system shown repeatedly but functioning very differently depending on whether cocaine is present or absent. So, cocaine is a Schedule II stimulant with a short half-life but extremely fast blood-brain barrier penetration. That speed matters so importantly. It's one of the reasons cocaine is so reinforcing and extremely disruptive to normal brain signaling. We're also grounding this in routes of administration, dosing ranges, and physical properties. So, these details help explain binge patterns, overdose risk, and why the crash after cocaine can actually be so severe. From this point forward, each slide that shows a comparison will be explained by all three of us, each focusing on one brain state, so you can clearly see how these differences emerge. And this is just kind of a quick overview of cocaine. You've got a couple of different street names that you'll see. The most often that you'll hear things like speedball, um, nose candy, and blow. And then common dosing has a couple of different things. So we've got the low dose is going to be around 10 to 30 milligrams, which is about a half line, or smoked is about 15 to 25 milligrams. Moderate, anywhere from 30 to 70. And then high is 70 to 150. Overdose range depends on a couple of different things, but can be anywhere from 30 milligrams to 1.2 or more. And then it's considered lethal at 1.2 grams plus.
Okay, so for the mechanisms of action, I'll start with the sober brain. In a healthy state, neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin are released and then cleared from the synapse efficiently. Transporters like DAT, NET, and SERT act almost like cleanup crews, keeping communication balanced, and this supports stable mood, attention, motivation, and decision making.
And then during cocaine intoxication, those transporters are blocked. Dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin then rapidly build up in the synapse. Cocaine also blocks voltage-gated sodium channels and directly increases the norepinephrine release in the locus coeruleus neurons through the protein kinase C activation. This means it's not just prolonged signaling, it's amplified release. The result is intense euphoria, alertness, and arousal paired with loss of regulatory control.
In withdrawal, the brain swings in opposite direction. The receptors have been downregulated and neurotransmitter levels are very low. Dopamine signaling drops, pleasure is harder to feel, and the stress systems dominate. This is where fatigue, depression, and strong cravings emerge.
In sobriety, with the neurotransmitters and pathways, dopamine flows in a regulated way from the ventral tegmental area to the nucleus accumbens and forward to the prefrontal cortex. The reward and control systems work together, allowing motivation without impulsivity.
And then when you have cocaine on board, that balance collapses entirely. Dopamine floods the reward pathway, especially the nucleus accumbens, while norepinephrine and serotonin spike. The prefrontal cortex then becomes less effective, so reward overrides that kind of judgment and discernment.
During withdrawal, dopamine output is low, while the amygdala becomes more reactive, like screaming. The prefrontal cortex struggles to regulate emotions and impulses, increasing stress, sensitivity, and relapse risk.
The structural, regional, and volume changes with the sober brain. Structurally, the sober brain shows normal prefrontal activity, balanced amygdala responses, and healthy hippocampal volume, and imaging tends to show even and symmetric activation.
While during intoxication, we see the reduced prefrontal activity and increased activation in the emotion and reward sensitive regions. These are primarily functional changes, things like increased metabolic demand and altered blood flow, rather than immediate structural damage.
In withdrawal, global brain activity often drops. The prefrontal cortex remains underactive. Hippocampal activity may be reduced, and with chronic use, long-term gray matter reductions can appear.
The cognitive impacts with the sober brain, cognitively, sobriety supports normal memory formation, attention, and impulse control, and the prefrontal cortex helps to weigh consequences before taking action.
During intoxication, cocaine strongly encodes the drug cue memories through the hippocampus and the amygdala. At the same time, prefrontal hypoactivity leads to impulsive decisions, reduced inhibition, and risk taking.
Withdrawal brings poor working memory, slowed thinking, and difficulty concentrating. Craving-driven thoughts often override planning and long-term goals.
The behavioral and social. Now, with a sober brain, behavior is more regulated, communication is clearer, and social interactions are more stable.
In intoxication, it often shows up as things like rapid speech, emotional reactivity, disinhibition, and conflict-prone behavior. These reflect reduced prefrontal inhibition paired with the heightened amygdala and reward activity.
During withdrawal, people may withdraw socially, feeling emotionally flat or irritable. This reflects low dopamine drive and increased activation of stress and social pain circuits.
With the physical and physiological impacts, in a sober state, the body maintains balance across some systems. The brain receives steady blood flow, vision tracks normally, speech is clear, breathing is regulated, the heart maintains a stable rhythm, and hormones respond appropriately to stress. Digestion is regular, and circulation supports healthy sexual and physical functioning.
Whereas in cocaine intoxication, it pushes nearly every system into overdrive, which is why it's considered a stimulant. In the brain, vasoconstriction reduces blood flow, while metabolic demand increases, raising the chances of stroke. Eyes appear dilated, speech becomes pressured, breathing may accelerate, and the heart is placed under significant amounts of strain. The adrenal glands then flood the body with stress hormones, blood sugar regulation becomes super unstable, skin will begin to overheat, bowel activity can slow, sexual functioning becomes dysregulated, and veins will constrict, increasing the tissue damage risk.
Withdrawal reflects depletion rather than overactivation. The brain slows, the energy drops, speech becomes quieter, sleep is disrupted, digestion becomes irregular, sexual interest declines, and stress sensitivity remains pretty high.
Now, with the developmental processes, normal sober development typically follows predictable milestones. Early childhood involves rapid brain growth, motor and sensory development, first words, and attachment formation. From ages 2 to 6, language explodes, pretend play emerges, and early emotional regulation develops. Between 6 and 12, logical thinking, academic skills, peer relationships, and self-control begin to strengthen. Adolescence brings puberty, identity formation, heightened reward sensitivity, and emotional validity. From 18 to 25, the prefrontal cortex continues maturing, solidifying executive function, and adulthood does bring cognitive stability, and later life involves gradual slowing alongside emotional resilience.
With intoxication, it can cause different spikes in these areas. So this graph is more showing where you could kind of jump from based on where you introduce substances and experience withdrawal and stuff. So when cocaine intoxication overlays it, development becomes extremely unstable. Reward overstimulation disrupts emotional regulation, increases risk taking, and interferes with identity formation, especially during adolescence and early adulthood.
Withdrawal adds low motivation, anhedonia, and cognitive slowing. Repeated withdrawal cycles can stall development or accelerate decline over time.
With development tolerance and dependence, tolerance develops really quickly with cocaine because dopamine receptors become less responsive. People then escalate doses, but pleasure diminishes and crashes intensify. Dependence is primarily psychological, driven by craving, stress system hyperactivation, and inability to feel pleasure without the drug. However, there's a strong tissue dependence factor, which includes things like nasal septum damage, cardiovascular scarring, and long-term dopaminergic changes.
Moving forward to the clinical application. Um, this slide focuses on how current neuroscience research directly informs clinical practice. Now, one of the biggest findings across recent studies is that cocaine doesn't just affect dopamine, it disrupts stress systems, blood flow, and executive control, which means treatment has to address more than cravings alone.
Forgive me just a second.
No, you're good.
Cocaine disrupts reward, stress, and executive control systems. Many of these changes are adaptive, not permanent, and can improve with sustained treatment. Understanding the brain helps reduce the stigma and supportive effect, compassionate care.
Awesome. Here are our references, and that is our presentation. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.